Hi, future people. Thank you for tuning in to my predictions for the 2020-2021 Premier League season. Named as such because there are 20 teams, 20 positions they can finish, 20 theoretically possible winners, 20 games, if you don't count the last 18, and one idiot who is erroneously trying to pretend he has any idea what's going to happen. That's me, by the way. I wrote way more than I thought I would. I promise I expected this video to be about 10 to 15 minutes. But anyway, let's start off with the relegation places. In 20th, West Brom. In 19th, Fulham. I see no reason to differ from the consensus that recently promoted teams Fulham and West Brom, despite having recent Premier League experience, will not do much better than their last top-flight outings and finish in the bottom three places. The most common result of the past decade of the Premier League is for one of the newly promoted teams to go straight back down, but it's more common for two to go back down than all of them to stay up. And while I wouldn't be absurdly surprised to see one or both of these teams squeak a top 17 finish on the back of a successful season of the Championship, I can make a much better case that every other team will stay up than Fulham or West Brom, who really seem like good Championship teams, and sorry Baggies and Cottagers fans, not anything more than that. And by the way, I'm doing this as a bit of a tier list, so I'll point out that these two teams are in the relegation favorites tier. If you like letters, this is the F tier. F because they're falling back down. Next, 4 teams are in the D tier. D for dangerously close to relegation. Number 18, Aston Villa. Villa are indeed a bad team. Well, I was very, very close to putting them in safety, thinking that Dean Smith will be able to get the team playing better around their returning star Zach Grealish in their second season up. It's equally as likely Grealish fails to repeat his arguably elite numbers from last season due to injury, frustration, or just being defensively countered by the better team they play against, and the rest of the team are as terrible as they were last year. Number 17, West Ham. West Ham are a disaster, and I think if Villa and Newcastle survive relegation, it will be due to the Hammers setting themselves up to, presumably, set the record for stadium capacity in the Championship. I haven't verified that statistic because I don't think it matters in the context of this video. Likewise, if Declan Rice leaves and West Ham fail to strengthen elsewhere, I don't think they will matter in the context of the 21-22 Premier League season. Number 16, Newcastle. Many people think the Magpies are top contenders to go back down to the Championship. I think they've strengthened by bringing in solid 16th or 17th place level players like Callum Wilson and Ryan Fraser, and while I don't think anyone should expect anything less than a tense and often frustrating season at St. James Park, I think one of the aforementioned Claret and Blue teams will have a bigger collapse, and the Zordies will get to watch another season of this disappointing team. Home, I should add, of both American DeAndre Yedlin, for some reason, and Atlanta United legend Miguel Almiron. Hopefully, if they do stay up, next season will act as a shop window for a prospective new owner. Good luck. Number 15, Crystal Palace. Palace also aren't a good team, but unlike the three I just named, I think they have the best chance to put up a stable 40-something point season under Roy Hodgson, who is probably one of the better managers for bottom to mid-table teams in the league. I think they also have enough players in that just good enough category, including Wilfried Zaha and Chelsea loanee Michy Batshuayi, who will surely be a threat on the counter as they attempt to play Brexit ball against convincingly better teams. Will they be able to keep staying up once Roy Hodgson leaves, which is probably not going to be too long from now, considering he's in the last year of his contract, and, with all due respect, old? I don't know. But I think they have enough to stay in the top flight for another season. Next up is the C tier. C for could be upper mid-table sleepers, or could be saying, crap, we might get relegated if the season is looking calamitous when the weather gets cold. Number 14, Brighton and Hove Albion. This is a team I'm not sure about putting up here. Arguably, they could also go in the D tier, but I like having even numbers of teams in these tiers. For some reason, I don't know. And I think this team isn't all that bad. Unlike the Brexit ball of teams like Palace, Newcastle, and West Ham that we can expect to see, Brighton under Graham Potter are relatively exciting. Australian centre mid Aaron Moy leaving is a loss for them, but I think Premier League winner Adam Lallana and Zol Veltman from Ajax makes them a better team than their 15th place last year. Hence, 14th. Now, things might be a little dim compared to the other three teams of this tier, but I don't think it will be as dark as it could be for the four in the last tier. And maybe it will seem like things on the south coast are brightening. Number 13. Burnley. Sean Dyche is a great manager. I think he deserves a spot at a bigger club, or perhaps the England side that he wanted, but until then, let's just enjoy Zenzo Mourinho's motivational and tactical skills guiding Burnley into another safe 40 or 50-something point season. Number 12. Leeds United. Marcelo Bielsa is also a great manager, arguably the most influential of the era worldwide. It's going to be tremendously fun seeing his obsessive tactical genius and a style that requires both tireless work rate and players that understand what he wants them to do at arguably the highest level of the domestic game. Leeds are a bit of a sleeping giant, being historically quite successful despite a long period outside the Premier League, and they're allowing Bielsa to bring in more players to presumably fit his system and allow them to see success in his first season in the English top flight, including Spanish national teamer Rodrigo as a necessary upgrade to the serviceable yet perhaps overmatched in this level Patrick Bamford. While I could see them still not being good enough to consistently implement his style against a much higher level of play than last year, I could just as easily see them having similar success to Wolves, comfortably outdoing both my 12th place prediction for them and the expectations on newly promoted teams to simply stay alive after making the jump. Number 11. Sheffield United. Staying in Yorkshire, Sheffield were elite defensively last year, one of only 4 teams that conceded less than 40 goals. That being said, without on-loan Man United goalkeeper Dean Henderson, who heads back to Old Trafford to compete with David De Gea, I don't think they'll repeat such a feat, and there's a chance even that their lack of goals — they were also one of only 6 teams that scored less than 40 goals last year — they may sink into lower mid-table obscurity after they fell out of European contention in last season's restart. That being said, I think they'll be easily clear of relegation this season under Chris Wilder's back 5 overload the wing system. Next up is the B tier. B for better hope a top 6 team wins both the cups, so 7th is good enough for Europe. Number 10, Southampton. The consensus seems to be that Southampton will finish 10th this season, with the top 8 teams, plus arguably Everton, improving at least as much, if not more, as Ralph Hasenhüttl's side. But at the same time, Southampton seem better than the other 10 teams in the league. Southampton are an excellent pressing team under Hasenhüttl, although considering only 29 goals were scored by players other than Danny Ings last season for the Saints, I think they might struggle to score enough goals to be too serious a European contender. But if they can figure that out, sky's the limit. If by the sky you mean sneaking into the Europa League, I suppose. Number 9. Leicester City. Leicester were very bad after the restart, but considering how good they were over the whole season, especially when they had James Maddison healthy, it's hard to imagine they dropped too far deep into mid-table. That being said, it doesn't look like they've improved as much as the teams around them, and I could see a slow start leading to pressure around Brendan Rodgers, who, admittedly, I do think is a good manager, and is part of the reason that I think that they still do better than teams like Southampton, Sheffield, and Leeds. Number 8, Wolves. Wolves, I think, are going to continue being in that upper mid-table zone. They're good defensively, and while I don't intend on overrating Raul Jimenez or Adama Traore, they're a very important player, and of course, quite good pieces in Nuno Espirito Santo's counter-attacking system. They've improved, but with Matt Doherty, another key piece at fullback, leaving, I don't think it's enough to get them seriously running for anything more than maybe a Europa League spot. But I think that's good enough for them. They're getting gradually better, signing young players, and staying consistent in tactics and manager. Especially if they maintain access to that Portuguese pipeline, don't expect them to fall off anytime soon. Number 7, Everton. One word, James. I think James Rodriguez is quite good. In my opinion, he would be the best player or thereabouts in all but 5 leagues and easily would start for all but about 10 teams. Unfortunately for him, he's been on a team in that list for the past 6 years of his career. Under a manager he's comfortable with, not to mention with quality midfielders Allan from Napoli and Abdoulaye Doucouré from Watford and other attacking talent like Richarlison and Dominic Calvert-Lewin, all also playing alongside him, he could have a big year. I would not be surprised if Carlo Ancelotti, keep in mind one of the greatest managers of his generation, even if that's arguably a generation ago, is able to lead Everton back into Champions League contention. But I'm being conservative here and picking them merely for 7th. Stay tuned. Now it's the A tier. A for almost good enough for the Champions League, but, well, probably not this year. Number 6, Arsenal. As the narrative indicates, the Gunners have a promising young manager, a promising young squad, and look likely to be back into promising young Champions League places in the next couple years. I suppose I agree with this narrative, and I also think Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang is an elite striker for any team, not to mention Willian will probably have a good season or 2 left in his expensive legs, but I don't think they will be good enough to make the top 4. Not this year. Number 5, Tottenham Hotspur. Can Mourinho work his magic? Maybe? Maybe not? Who knows, man? Who knows? They've got a really good manager and some really good players. That's not always enough, and while I could see them put up a serious run at the top 4, maybe even a little more, I think considering some potential depth issues, including specifically at forward, it's more likely they end up around 5th. This could definitely be a defining year, not only for Mourinho's reputation as one of the greatest ever managers, but for the reputations of players like Harry Kane as true world elites. Meanwhile, another mediocre year would both prove the doubters right and hurt their reputation towards prospective future players as a contender in England and a regular Champions League attendee. I guess you could say, it's all or nothing. Thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to like and subscribe and make sure... Nah, just kidding. And the next tier. Well, this is embarrassing, but we've ran out of letters, so I guess I'll go with colors. This is a green tier, as both these teams have spent 2020 spending that paper. I know it's not American money, so the color thing isn't perfect, but they're also green because both managers are fairly young, and many of their players are also young. See, it works. It works. Number 4, Manchester United. Since signing Bruno Fernandes, Man United have been quite good. I don't expect Donny van de Beek to be a starter, especially if they sign Jadon Sancho, which you'd imagine only leaves 3 central spaces for Bruno, World Cup winner, and Graham Souness's nemesis Paul Pogba, and a more defensive option. But depth is important in this season, and he brings that. Now, I think they could easily finish ahead of Chelsea, but I think a lot of it depends on whether or not either team can hit their transfer targets. Perhaps if there's no new goalkeeper at Stamford Bridge, while Sancho books his ticket to Old Trafford, I've swapped these two, but for now it's how it is here. Number 3, Chelsea. Frank Lampard is setting up to win every game 4-3. With whatever goalkeeper he ends up getting, or perhaps whatever goalkeeper he ends up stuck with, sitting behind a very old, yet still most likely very good Thiago Silva, and whichever arguably good center back they put next to him, trying to defend against the counters that come in the gaps of Chelsea's attacks. Speaking of that attack, Havertz, Ziyech, Mount, Werner, Giroud, Abraham, and of course the American hope, Christian Pulisic, who is quite possibly Chelsea's best attacking player after the restart. That's an attack that could easily be right there with the next 2 teams. Defensively? Maybe not great still, but both will be bolstered by that lovely midfield of Mateo Kovacic and N'Golo Kante, who may be joined by the option of Declan Rice if that transfer from West Ham goes through. If Rice does join, I'm not sure if he'd be a starter every game, similar to Van de Beek, but he would be both an important depth option over a long season. Keep in mind N'Golo Kante was not healthy throughout all of last season. but he'll also be a good option if Chelsea choose to go more defensive. Not that I'm expecting that from crazy Frank Lampard. Now for the next tier, and sticking with color, they're the purple tier. Because purple is the color of royalty, and these are not just the only two teams to have won the English title since Antonio Conte led Chelsea to it in 2016-17, they were also the team that finished first and second, in both cases well clear of third, in the past 2 seasons, and I think they will do so again. Now, I know that royalty has nothing to do with winning the Premier League title, but I wrote this thinking that if I talk fast enough, the audience won't notice. Number 2, Man City. Great team. Great manager, so many brilliant players. Kevin De Bruyne is the best player in the league. Aguero is one of the best forwards, and well, if Sterling, Mahrez, and Bernardo Silva aren't automatically the best attacking player on your team, not to mention Foden, Jesus, and new signing Ferran Torres, you've got a good attack. This is the only team that I would say clearly has more quality and depth in attacks than Chelsea, and their defense, in my opinion, is clearly better as well. Especially with new signing Nathan Ake, who used to play for Chelsea. But anyway, while I give the first 18 teams I mentioned about a 10% combined chance to win the league, at most, I would say City have at least a 40% chance to return as champions. That's how big I think the gulf is, especially if these top 2 teams play at a level that we have seen them play at over the past seasons. Number 1, Liverpool. Liverpool are, in my opinion, the favorite to repeat the title. Perhaps not an overwhelming favorite, but I think that it's slightly more likely than Man City. They now have a backup left back in Kostas Tsimikas, I think. Yeah, let's go with that. While I might not know how to pronounce his name, I know that he's been, from what I've heard, a good starter at Olympiacos in Greece. I might also have Thiago Alcantara in midfield. Salah, Mane, and Firmino with an incredible front 3. They have the best pair of fullbacks on earth, one of the best center-backs on earth, and an elite goalkeeper as well, not to mention their often unsung yet still fairly deep midfield. Now, I do think that Wijnaldum's rumored move to Barcelona might hurt them, although Thiago will probably make up for that, if not more. And even then, if they need a different option, Naby Keita is still there and could very well reach a new ceiling this season under Klopp, and well, the last time one of their players went to Barcelona, it turned out better for Liverpool than anyone else. For the record, if they keep Wijnaldum and sign Thiago, which would be what I would be angling for if I was Jurgen Klopp, I think it removes doubt that they're the favorites to win the league, and maybe even give them a serious shot to actually break 100 points this year. They were 99 last season. Now time for the Golden Boot race, which I somehow wrote over 1,000 words on. Will I read them all? Hell, I'll probably read even more. Never believe them if they tell you I'm not out of my mind. I know a lot of my predictions for club finishes were safe, so I'll go with a bold pick for Golden Boot. Raheem Sterling. Yep, that's who I'm going with. Now, this year I think a lot of pressure is on Sterling, after both failing to win his 3rd straight Premier League with City and his own terrible miss against Lyon in the Champions League. This is a season where we can see whether or not Sterling will take it to the next level. After such notable failures, some players will collapse. But the best, especially if their managers have faith in them, will use it as motivation to get even better. Sterling has gradually improved over the last several years, and while I wouldn't be too shocked to see him dip back below 20 goals, which is what he hit last season, I could also see him get to 25 or even higher this year. More conventional picks? Well, let's look to North London. I think if Sterling doesn't win the Golden Boot, which I fully admit is probable despite the fact that I consider him the slight favorite, it'll be either a revitalized Harry Kane under Mourinho's legendary man management, or perhaps the safest pick, Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang putting together a 3rd straight 20-plus goal season at Arsenal. Rounding out the top 5 for me, let's head back to the Northwest, this time to my first pick's former club. Mohamed Salah and Sadio Mane are both very, very good, and I think they will both score a lot of goals. But I don't think either could really be called Golden Boot favorite, as Liverpool don't entirely rely on either to score goals. If one starts doing too much better, they'll be targeted defensively more, but if you leave one open, they're about equally as good at putting the ball in the back of the net against you. The past 2 seasons, Salah and Mane have scored basically the same number of goals, and I think that will happen again. Probably around 20, which will likely not be enough to top the league. But if, as a club, you have 2 20-plus goal scorers, well, you're likely winning the league. Those are my top 5. Still going through more. For some reason. The next 3 picks may not be the most exciting, but they must be mentioned. These are the solid veteran picks. First off, Danny Ings, the Southampton forward who scored 22 goals last season. Do I think he will get close to that? Not really. Probably 10 or 15, maybe high teens. But could he get over 20 again? Sure. Now, the top 5 players I mentioned, Sterling, Kane, Aubameyang, Salah, and Mane. And, by the way, I keep reading the name Kane as Kane in my head because I keep reading Mane. Anyway, those 5 players are 5 of only 7 players that are currently in a streak of scoring 15 or more goals in a season. The other 2 should be fairly easy to guess. Jamie Vardy and Sergio Aguero. Vardy, I think, has another couple mid to high teen seasons left in him, but I don't think much more than that this year should be expected. Meanwhile, Aguero, someone who has over half a goal per appearance in every season but once since joining Man City nearly a decade ago, is mostly splitting minutes up front with Gabriel Jesus, so I think we can probably expect another 15 in 25 type season from him. Both Vardy and Aguero are legends in their own right, and both I think are good picks to score when called upon, but for various reasons I don't think either will win the Golden Boot. But those guys are all old! Okay, boomers! We don't want to talk about you. You're in luck. I also have a list of dark horse youngsters. First off, the aforementioned Gabriel Jesus. His biggest limitation is that as he's splitting minutes with Aguero, he's unlikely to have enough chances to get that 20 or 25 goal season. Likewise, Aguero is still, in my opinion, a better forward, so it's not like Jesus is likely to play his way into a 30-plus start year. I also have Timo Werner on this list. Chelsea's new signing, I don't think, will be the sort to start every game, but I think he's likely to start most and come off the bench in most of the rest. If he adjusts to his new teammates, his new manager, and the new league he's playing in, I could easily see Werner scoring 15, 20, even more. Big ifs? Perhaps. But he should be mentioned. Now for a trio of Manchester United players. Marcus Rashford, Anthony Martial, and Mason Greenwood. All 3 are fairly young, exciting, and good. And if Jadon Sancho isn't signed and Solskjaer doesn't switch up the formation to fit Donny van de Beek, all 3 are likely starters. Greenwood is especially a dark horse as he only scored 10 goals last season, but consider that he played half the minutes of most of these players. He could get quite a bunch more. Rashford scored 17 goals last season, 7 more than his previous best, and has, in fact, bettered or at least equaled both his playing time and goals every year that he's been in the Premier League. Martial, I keep feeling like I'm underrating Anthony Martial in my mind. I initially overlooked him in this list, partially as I didn't think he'd be a breakout player, but he's still only 24 and scored as many goals as Rashford has in each of the last 2 years. The fact 3 of these players make my honorable mentions list is interesting. I guess it's like how Salah and Mane split the goals for Liverpool. That's also why neither make the top tiers of my picks, although if pressed I would say that Rashford is probably my 6th favorite to be top scorer. My next 2 dark horses, out of everyone who scored at least 13 goals last season, who I think will start, I have mentioned most of them and rated their chances. I don't think Raul Jimenez or Chris Wood, despite being quite good for their respective teams, will score many more goals than they did last year, nor do I think Kevin De Bruyne will have much reason to score more than the low to mid-teens when he can simply assist one of the world-class forwards ahead of him, a job he is more qualified than anyone to do. The last one I'm mentioning are the young Everton players, who we will see alongside James and Ancelotti's transformed Toffee's side, Richarlison and Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Both 23, both, again, similar to the forward sets at Liverpool and Man United, tied last season for the team's top scorer, 10 behind Jamie Vardy's Golden Boot numbers. Should Ancelotti's rebuilding of Everton pay dividends, perhaps it will involve one of them closing the gap. Except it won't be, because it will be Raheem Sterling. But Liverpool will win. And the teams getting relegated will be a selection from the 2 claret and blue teams not managed by Sean Dyche and the 2 newly promoted teams not managed by Marcelo Bielsa. That's some creative writing right there. This has been Third Yellow, and I've been Daniel. I will be back for more, probably not usually focused on just the Premier League, but perhaps I'll pop in with some analysis here or there. But until then, enjoy the season.